Podcasting from Hartford, you're listening to the Connecticut Scoreboard Podcast, your place for all things Connecticut sports. And here is your host, Jared Kotler.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Connecticut Scoreboard Podcast. I'm really excited for today's episode, and it's one that I think came about at the perfect time. Joining me today is Big East Commissioner Val Ackerman. The Commissioner and I talk about the growth of the league since she began her role, talk about why now was the right time to bring UConn back into the conference, and take a deep dive into the two biggest stories around college sports right now, the COVID-19 pandemic and social justice issues. And now to my conversation with Commissioner Val Ackerman. Commissioner Ackerman, to start here, I kind of want to start taking a look. When you first became the Commissioner of the Big East, it was really quite the year of change for the conference, and you really took over a new league. How would you say that the league has evolved from when you first became commissioner to where it is today, especially, as here in Connecticut, we're getting excited with UConn being back in the conference?
Well, Jared, I would say it's been quite a journey, to say the least. When the conference reconfigured back in 2013, I would say our group was very hopeful. The seven schools who withdrew from the old Big East, their presidents especially did have a vision about going back to what the Big East was when it was formed in '79, with UConn as a charter member, this notion of a basketball-centric conference that was academically strong and could build on other values that are important to the schools, namely, in the case of our school, service. We have many Catholic schools. And so there was a hopefulness, I'd say, and optimism about the future, but a lot of uncertainty because, there was a parting of ways with ESPN. Fox became the new broadcast partner, and they've been great. It was some new schools in the mix in Butler, Creighton, and Xavier, all tremendous basketball heritages, but new as Big East schools. And then, of course, to your point, it was all new staff. The office was relocating from Providence to New York City. So that was really new. Where we were able to hold on to sort of the remnants of the old league were with the name, which was important for our presidents to keep. And then the arrangement with Madison Square Garden was very familiar because the Big East had been there for many years, and our group of schools was able to assume the rights to have the new Big East tournament played there. So that was, again, some important familiarity that contributed to this sense of optimism that the league could stay relevant and certainly in basketball remain very competitive. So that was then. It was a tough couple of years just getting the league ramped back up again and hiring the staff and getting us, back on track operationally. But it's been just incredible to see how things have turned out. I'm proud of what we've accomplished. And of course, we have a lot to look forward to now with UConn coming back.
You talk about a feeling of being hopeful in what this new Big East would look like and be, now kind of looking back from where it's been to where it is today. Are you surprised with the success of the league, or did you feel that the league, would be able to perform at such a high level that it has been the past few years?
Well, please, for sure. And I want to tip my hat to our schools. I mean, they're the ones that are doing it on the playing surfaces. And, I'll note, not only have we done really well in men's basketball, led by Villanova, who's brought home 2 national championships in the last 4 years. But, men's soccer, Georgetown's actually the defending national champion in men's soccer. We've had successes in women's soccer, not quite at that degree, but we've advanced far in the tournament. We've had standing running in the Big East. Providence has actually won the national championship in women's cross country since the new Big East was formed. And we've had other sort of successes along the way. And so that part has been very gratifying. We've maintained high graduation rates. In the metrics that the NCAA issues to gauge academic performance, the Big East consistently rates very, very well, behind only the Ivy and the Patriot League in terms of key metrics there. So that's, of course, important to our presidents. So could we have foreseen this? I don't know. We were just at that time, 7 years ago, trying to get through the day. And, I was just trying to get some staff hired to take the load off. So, again, we were hopeful, but who knew? And, again, I tip my hat to our schools. And now, again, with UConn coming in, we know they're going to add a great deal, not only in terms of these academic and athletics outcomes, but it's what they'll bring in terms of the fan support and that sense of history, which is important for so many people in our league, to kind of bring that back and reignite it. We think makes this a very, very kind of exciting time for the league.
Absolutely. UConn fans have wanted back in the Big East for quite some time. The rumors were always out there floating around. What was it about, this moment in time, the past year or so, that really made it seem like now was the time to bring back UConn?
You're right. We had some contact with the Huskies over the years. Interestingly, they remained in the Big East as an affiliate for field hockey and women's lacrosse. And so we've been actually the beneficiaries of the successes of Coach Stevens, who you probably know just retired after an amazing run with the Huskies field hockey program. So that was actually a point of pride for us that UConn was still a Big East member as an affiliate for those two sports. So we've kind of stayed in touch. And I would say it was really last year in the springtime that I guess I would say we sort of made contact. And I think really some of this has come from the Husky side. They, I think, have had to get a better understanding of where they want to go in athletics, where football stands with them. Obviously, their move to the Big East did not include football. So Dave Benedict has had to figure out separately how to manage the football program there, which has its own complications. But I think, we were doing well at 10 schools, and that was kind of the plan for as long as it needed to be. But there was one school out there that sort of had something that was additive for basketball and for history and for the Garden and the fan support that they'll bring, we know. And certainly for women's basketball, I can't say enough about Coach Oriema and his great dynasty, really. And I've known, for many years through work I've done in women's basketball. So it really is very exciting to be reunited with him and to have UConn representing the Big East now on the national stage. So all those things really kind of combined, and a time seemed right as we look to our future to have UConn be part of that.
This year in 2020 has been quite the year, especially, in the sports world. So a couple things I wanted to speak with you about here. I know the Big East has been one of the conferences that's really been out in front of social justice issues, whether it's making the decision to add Black Lives Matter patches to the uniforms this year, establishing, the Be the Change program. Talk about the importance of these initiatives, and why the Big East, really got out in front and was a leader in these areas.
Well, we like many people, it was hard to be alive and not be moved by the events that took place back in the spring. The violent deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and the many before them and the ones that have followed. And it did create a great deal of, I would say, emotional conversation within our conference about how we could live in a country where that could still happen. And it did ignite various stakeholder groups to speak up and really push to see if we can bring more than words to the possibility of change and really try to come up with some concrete action steps. I will note that over a year ago, we were, I think, one of the first conferences to form an internal working group on diversity and inclusion. That has one representative appointed by the presidents of our schools, one rep per school. They handed us incredible feedback that we worked into a strategic initiative, a strategic plan that our board has approved. So really, before any of the events of the last 6 months got underway, we were already trying to figure out how to do better with hiring, trying to figure out how to do better with education, and trying to bring awareness to the importance of a diverse workplace. So now we've kind of morphed that over to more of a focus on anti-racism and anti-bigotry, and again, driven by stakeholders, including that working group, coaches groups. Our assistant coaches have formed a coalition around this, in the sport of basketball, our SAC, our ADs. I mean, there's so many that have really, wanted the Big East to sort of do something. So we're on our way. You mentioned our support of the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been led by our men's basketball programs. We have a partnership now with RISE, which is a leading programmer of programming around prejudice and D&I and anti-racism, and also has a civic engagement platform that we're accessing, because that's another point of intense interest for our folks is getting involved from a civic engagement standpoint. And then we've got some other things in the pipeline that we'll probably be announcing. You mentioned Be the Change, which is our engagement platform, but there's other things we're going to be doing and plan to make this a long-term area for our schools. And, we're just a sports league, but we have assets here and we want to put them to good use, and hopefully together with other organizations, we can help make a difference.
Absolutely. The other big issue that's really taken over this year has been this pandemic. And I know it probably had to be a tough call for the Big East to make that move to cancel fall sports. What was that like to have to make that decision to put those sports on hold and cancel them for this year?
Well, it was a very, very painful decision, to say the least, and followed an exhaustive review that included not just our athletics directors and coaches, but also the input of a medical advisory task force that we put together back in the spring to help advise us on the science side of this. We're sort of sports administrators here. We're not scientists. So we have outside experts that have lent their expertise, their forecasts, have helped us, assess trend lines, and have guided us on important issues like testing availability, testing turnaround time, have pointed out to us issues relative to travel. So, for example, the Big East right now is in 11 different jurisdictions, 10 states plus DC. And because of the way that the virus is sort of ricocheting around the country, we have states in the Big East that can't accept travelers from other states in the Big East without either a test or a quarantine period. And that, if you're doing a basketball game or a soccer game or, a volleyball game, that really comes into play. So this task force, again, has helped counsel us. And to your point about fall sports, we just ultimately came to the decision that because mostly of testing availability, turnaround time, and travel, that we didn't foresee a way to play these contests this fall. We did say, and we are planning to move them to the spring. So that is the plan for those 6 sports that we sponsor in the fall. Football's not one, but we have 6 others. The NCAA, because so many conferences withdrew this fall, the NCAA has now moved the national championships for those sports to the spring. And so we're waiting details from the NCAA about that so that we can craft our schedules. And so painful, but we thought the right decision, given the information we had, and we made it at a time when we thought we needed to make it just so everyone could plan their lives. And now our attention does turn in earnest to the rest of our sports, including basketball. So, that one, those decisions loom. But again, very hard decision, but we think the right decision with our fall sports.
For sure. In terms of basketball, which I think is going to be of particular interest to a lot of people listening to this podcast, what has it been like planning for all of these different alternatives? Because from what we've seen out there are different starting dates, different plans for how to play, whether it's conference-only games in a bubble, non-conference bubbles. If you see what the ACC proposed yesterday of letting everyone into the NCAA tournament, what's it been like sifting through all of these different alternatives and ultimately, relatively soon having to come to a decision on how to proceed and move forward?
Well, I can't overstate the how maddening it's been. To be honest, I can't try to sugarcoat this. It's been crazy just over the last 6 months trying to, plan all sorts of contingencies because there is so little certainty that we have to go on here about how long the virus is going to continue, the ebbs and flows. Importantly, what impact is going to have on the openings of our campuses, which, as you know, is underway. has been underway in the last couple of weeks in earnest. And so we'll learn a lot about how that goes for our schools. They've got sort of bigger issues than athletics when it relates to campus opening. So in a business that's so calendarized, where coaches, for example, have their schedules down to the year, a year out in terms of, here's my practice day. I'm going to practice at this time on that day. Here's game day. Here's travel day. Here's recruiting day. Here's the day off, et cetera. And then they hand those diaries, those schedules, those day planners over to the athletes in turn, to not be able to know, what's going to happen in a couple months' time it's really unprecedented in a business like this to have to, work around that, but that we must. So it's been just, a whole lot of communication. I'm on multiple calls a week with commissioner colleagues, NCAA staff. We have stakeholder groups within our conference that meet frequently. And as it relates to basketball, all the things that you said are on the board. I mean, I think the most likely thing will be a delay to the start date of the season. It's supposed to start on November 10. I would suspect that date's going to get moved back, perhaps by at least a couple of weeks, just to allow for some additional time as it relates to testing advancements and to coincide with Thanksgiving, which is when campuses tend to kind of people will be clearing out this year. So it does potentially create a safer environment for athletics participants. And so that's on the board, how to do the travel, what's going to become of conference tournaments. I mean, we're hopeful. We hope we can find a way, and that's our intent. But there are a lot of moving parts right now as it relates to scheduling, the NCAA championships, officiating, game protocols, testing again, are all, things that frankly we all just have to figure out if we're going to have a year, the kind of year that we want to have.
I'll get you out of here on this one, and it's an exciting announcement, and I know everyone here in Connecticut is thrilled for this, that the Big East women's basketball tournament will be staying put here in Connecticut at Mohegan Sun. Talk a little bit about the excitement behind that and having that at Mohegan Sun each and every year now going forward.
Well, yes, it was an announcement that we had been holding a bit and wanted to make sure we had it all, things squared away. But as you noted, we have announced that for the next 3 years, the Big East women's tournament will be at Mohegan Sun, an arena well known to those of us who've worked in women's basketball. I'm happy to say that Amber Cox, who is a principal there, formerly ran the Phoenix Mercury, had a stint in the Big East office before she took her current position with the Sun, and now was our key contact in this arrangement. So we're really excited to be working with Amber and her team at Mohegan Sun. I was president of the WNBA when the Sun came to be. And so I'm very familiar with the place. I've been up there many times to see games. It's a tremendous facility. It's all contained, as everyone who's been there knows. So I think for our athletes, our coaches, our fans, it'll be a great environment to spend a couple of days. And our schools felt this was a place for us to be. We have spent the last now 7 years for our women out in the Midwest in Chicago, most years, Milwaukee 1 year at Marquette. But we were really moved by the promise of some really extraordinary fan support because of the UConn following there. And that was absolutely a contributing factor. It's good travel for a number of our Eastern Seaboard Big East schools. So all in all, it just seemed to make the most sense and was the right move at this point. So, come next March, hopefully as conditions allow, the Big East women will be up at Mohegan Sun. So we hope all your listeners have a chance to come out and cheer their favorite team.
Yeah, absolutely. Commissioner Ackerman, I really appreciate the time and best of luck as you navigate these challenging times and getting things ready for the rest of the year. So appreciate the time and thanks for coming on.
Great. Thanks, Jared.
Thanks for listening to the Connecticut Scoreboard Podcast with Jared Cutler. If you like the show and want to know more, check out the podcast on Twitter at CT Scoreboard Pod, the host at Jared Cutler, and find us on Facebook at the Connecticut Scoreboard Podcast. Finally, if you enjoy what you're listening to, rate and review us on iTunes. Thanks again for listening.